They just want to know that these memories live on. They recognize that's the last move they'll make. Everybody knows it. We don't talk about it. We don't say that, but we all know that.
What if you could hand over one of the most stressful experiences of your life? Downsizing, selling your home, moving, and know it would all be handled with compassion, clarity, and care. That's exactly what today's guest built her company to do.
Welcome to From Leads to Leases, a CCR growth podcast that helps senior living providers transform their complex challenges into opportunities. Listen in for stories from industry leaders, innovative strategies, and insights. And with our expertise, learn how to increase occupancy faster, guaranteed.
Welcome back to another episode of From Leads to Leases, the podcast that dives deep into the senior living and senior care industries, bringing you insights, strategies, and stories from the experts at the forefront of innovation, leadership, and care. I'm your host, Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth. For those of you who don't know about us, CCR Growth is a full-service marketing and growth agency that's exclusive to the senior living industry. Through this podcast, I'm here to guide you through the evolving landscape of senior care, exploring the innovations, the strategies, and leadership insights that are shaping the future of the industry. So whether you're a provider, a caregiver, or an industry leader, this show is here to help you make informed decisions and create meaningful impact. So today's guest is Maureen Longoria, the co-founder and CEO of LiveNow Relocation, a company that's revolutionizing how families experience later in life transitions. With over 25 years of experience in relocation management and an impressive resume of executive roles, Maureen is now focused on ensuring older adults and their families feel supported, protected, and empowered every step of the way. She's also part of AARP's Age Tech Collaborative, and her work is reshaping how we think about aging, independence, and the logistics of moving. So, Maureen, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Jerry.
Obviously, this is such a huge part of the senior living experience, moving, relocation, downsizing. So I think there's probably a ton of stuff we can talk about. I wanted to just talk first about the calling, what brought you into this space. You said getting into relocation was an accident, but looking back now, what do you think drew you to work that's all about guiding people through uncertain transitions?
You know, nobody has ever asked me that question before. So when I think about it, the first thing that comes to mind is I like to build things and I like connecting the dots. And in relocation, as you move people around, it's all about connecting the dots. But building, I was really lucky. I fell into my first job in relocation because I had started out in retail in an executive training program when the company got bought out. And I didn't want to make the move to Minneapolis from Chicago. I was living my best life in Chicago. And so I found a job in marketing, and my major was marketing. I'm like, I can market. My major was marketing and happened to be in relocation. Well, before I knew it, I was cold calling, which I said I would never do. My dad was in sales. I was very familiar with sales, and but lo and behold, and I just told myself, you know what? It's only a cold call the first time, and then after that, it's not cold anymore because you've already spoken to them. So I just dug in. In that first job in relocation, they relocated me to California, and when I relocated to California, I was a renter. I was 23, 24 years old, right? Living my best life, and then moving to San Francisco. And it became very clear this was a prominent relocation management company, but they had no services for people that were renting. I still needed to ship stuff out there. I still needed to find a place to live. I was uprooting my lifestyle. I needed a place to work out. How do I meet new friends? And so I went to the company and said, we need to build something for people like me, because almost half of the renters, people moving, are renters. And so they said, all right, put together a program, and I did. And the first company I sold it to was Budget Rent-A-Car. And so, I think that just goes back to my ability to build, and that's what kind of got me hooked on relocation. And then I had a series of jobs after that. I worked for another company, and then I went and built a relocation management company for North America's largest agent at the time, because they saw that their business was getting eaten up by their relocation management company, so they wanted to build their own. So I went and built a relocation management company back then. So I think it was just the ability to build within, an organization and in a field in which it was all about connecting the dots as well.
And then how did that connect into the senior living space? I mean, when did you realize that senior relocation wasn't just about logistics? It's more about the emotion, the identity, and the trust that you have to build in that process.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I went to work for a relocation company that was based, they did expense tracking and technology, and then they also did some real estate services for senior living communities. And I went in as the chief revenue officer for both companies, actually, and I got to learn a little bit more about the senior space. And I would go to presentations at senior living communities to talk about our services. And I spent a lot of time before the presentations and after talking to the prospects that were there visiting the community that came to hear the presentation. And I would always, ask before I did a presentation, what brought you here? What did you want to learn about? What prompted it? And some of them just enjoyed the free lunch, but a lot of them really did come in looking for some relevant information to help them. And I learned a lot when I would start talking to them about it, about what was stopping them from moving forward, because it was very clear they recognized that they would lead a better life in that community, right? That they would enjoy making new friends, having meals made for them, not having to worry about their home anymore, not having those expenses that pop out of the blue, things like this. And so in talking about them, it was clear that they thought they would live a better life there, but there was something stopping them. And it all got down to there was either one little thing or just the overwhelming burden of how am I going to do this? And there was nobody holding their hand to manage every aspect of it. That's what we do in corporate relocation. When we move somebody for a company, we manage every aspect of it. But in senior living, typically what happens is, oh, here's the name of a realtor, or here's someone that can help you downsize, or here's the name of some movers, call them. And the problem with that are a couple of things. First of all, you've now put the onus on them to have to make all these calls. And if you've ever noticed that as you age, you're less inclined to pick up the phone and make those calls, right? And so now the onus is on them to do that. And a lot of times they make those calls and they don't get a return phone call. I don't know if you've ever called a mover, but chances are, good chance they're not going to call you back. And so the onus was on them to do all that work, but it still didn't really solve the underlying problem, which was they didn't have one person there that could guide them through all of this. Most of them haven't sold their home and, haven't sold a home in 30, 40, 50 years, or maybe never sold a home. And this is the first home they're selling, right? Or maybe their husband handled it when they did things before and now he's passed away, so it's a lot, and so much has changed in the past 5 to 10 years with technology. And so everything is new and different. So without that person guiding them, the lucky ones had an adult child who had the time to help them. But sometimes that in and of itself was a really bad solution because maybe there's friction in that relationship, and then that caused more friction, right? So it was really just being at those presentations and talking to the older adults that were considering that move that I realized this could be done so much better. We could give them the same executive level corporate class move everybody else got. We can do this and still be a company that makes profits and but does all the right things. And so that's what really prompted it. And because it broke my heart to see them. And then too, you hear the stories of, I heard from a woman a couple of weeks ago when I was doing a presentation. She said she gave some mover $500 4 different times. Different movers, $500. And I'm like, it was probably the same darn mover that kept coming back under a different name saying, I'll take your stuff. And so there's so much more of that going on in this day and age. I just, love the idea of being able to take a ton of stress off of them by being able to be that one point of contact for them, but at the same time, being that advocate, making sure that they're working with quality providers that are going to look out for them and do a good job at a fair price. That's it in a nutshell. It's just, that's what we built because that's what we heard they really needed.
Do you feel like that's the biggest gap in the system right now when somebody decides that, or a loved one or the older adult themselves decides that they need to move, or it's time to even start thinking about moving?
That, what happens is they'll go to the community and they get all excited, right? And they're like, oh, I could see myself here. Gosh, that would be great to make some new friends and have activities. And then what happens, for the most part, Jerry, they go back home and they pull in the garage, they look around. And they're like, how am I supposed to get those bins from the top there? Or how am I supposed to clean out this garage? I can't lift that stuff. Or they go in the house and they go in the basement and it just becomes daunting, completely overwhelming to them. That's where we come in and we explain there are people that we can hire that can do all of that for you and put you in a position just to make the decisions, right? They'll go in the garage and pull everything down. You tell them, what's going to go to a charitable organization? What are you going to give to your son? What are you going to keep, and they'll do all the heavy lifting for you. And they don't realize that these people exist. We partner with the National Association of Senior Move Managers, and that's what these people do, senior move managers. They're an organization of a small local company that will provide that sort of assistance. And most people have no idea they exist. And, once you start explaining that's what we can help them with, things look a little bit different. You mean somebody can do that for me? I didn't want to bother my daughter. She's so busy. She's got a job. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, that's a huge part of it is just they want to do it, and they get home and they're like, how am I going to do it? So
you also talked about being the advocate where everyone else just seems to just want the transaction, right? Why is that so powerful in this space, do you think?
Oh gosh, because it's the right thing to do, because nobody deserves to have that advocate more than the senior.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Honestly, it's just
Absolutely.
the right thing to do. I like to tell people, imagine you had an adult daughter who's a type A personality with an MBA in relocation, managing your relocation to the community for you. That's us. That's us. That's what we just want to be like that adult daughter, looking out for their best interest, being in a position to give them all the information they need to make the best decisions for themselves. And so we do that. The way we set up our company, so it's not transactional, is we provide them with one dedicated relocation specialist who's accountable for making sure the transition goes smoothly, taking all the stress out. That's their role. And they're there to advocate for them throughout the process and give them all the information they need to make the best decisions. We don't make any decisions, and we give them choices. So if they need a mover, we can give them choices of several movers, but they have a peace of mind knowing we've already thoroughly vetted those movers. And when I say thoroughly vet, I mean it. We've started with the Better Business Bureau. We looked at Google reviews. We looked at Yelp reviews. We interviewed them. We make sure they're licensed, they're bonded, they're insured. We collect their certificates of insurance, and we keep up. And if theirs expires, and we don't have their updated one, we don't give them a move, because that's really important. So we do the kind of vetting most senior living communities would have no idea needs to be done before recommending these providers. But we know, because our background was corporate relocation, so we know what to look for when we look for suppliers. We know what to look for in a realtor. 71% of realtors last year did not sell one home. Well, that's thinking 71% of realtors did not sell one home.
Wow.
So if they're not selling a home,
man.
I know, if they're not selling a home, they're not generating income. They're not generating income. They're not investing in the resources to properly market that home. So we only work with full-time top producing agents. But again, if I'm the adult daughter, what would I do with that contract with my MBA in relocation? Well, I would say to that realtor, there's a bunch of junk fees in here. I see you have an admin fee of $250 and then a cancellation fee of $750 and a marketing fee of $500. Let's strike those from the agreement. I have the knowledge and expertise to know that I can have the leverage to do that. That's what we do. So on the real estate side, we strike those from the agreement, saving our client money. They wouldn't know to strike that. They would just pay it. It would come off their closing statement. We limit the listing agreements to 120 days. The normal listing agreement will be a year. So every time we look at a service that they might need, there's a couple of things we do. One of them, we vet the providers thoroughly to make sure that they're a quality provider and they have all their licenses, like I said, insurance and all that. But secondly, wherever we can, we negotiate better terms for them. So we have some additional services what we're offering. For instance, we just started offering Helpful Heroes, which is local firefighters and EMTs that can come in and help with handyman type jobs and do things, move things for them, whatever it is. So we negotiated a 5% discount for them from Helpful Heroes. We work with Artifacts, which is an app to store your memories. So when you can let go of the stuff, and we negotiated a half-hour free concierge session with them. So wherever we can, we take our leverage, because we work with almost 180 communities around the country, and we negotiate better rates for our clients. And so, not only are we making sure that they're working with quality providers, but then we're also giving them obviously the best rates possible wherever we can. And it's just, again, common sense to me. Like, if my mom were moving, what would I want somebody to do for her? And so everything we do is through the lens of, if that were my mom or that were my dad, right? What would we want to do for them? What would we want to see a company do to help them? And then it's just hiring people with a heart, right? That feel as strongly as we do about advocating for them.
Yeah. And that goes from, no longer service provider. Now you're acting as an advocate for that individual. So that's great. And you quickly brushed over the fact that you work with 180 communities. So I'm assuming you're nationwide, right?
We are nationwide. Yeah, absolutely. From the get-go, actually, one of our first clients was out in New York. So yeah, we're nationwide for sure. We're all over the country.
How do you manage that? How do you build a database of vetted providers and movers and realtors? That's got to be a huge network.
It is, and that's a great question. And so basically, whenever we bring on a new community, we'll vet those local providers, but we have some technology that we use, which is a huge piece of it too. So we built the LiveNow mobile platform, and within that platform, not only do we track everything related to that relocation for that senior so that they can have access to that information and the communities can, but we also then track all of our service suppliers. So you can go into the platform and say you need a supplier in Western Springs, Illinois, you can go in there and any suppliers in that market would then show up. So as soon as they're vetted, and we call them certified then as a LiveNow partner, they're in our platform as an active partner. And that's where we track all that information. And that's where we can track their certificates of insurance. And we'll know when it's going to expire. So we get the heads up and an email goes out to them. Hey, your certificate of insurance is expiring in 2 months. Please be sure to give us your updated one, because if we don't have it, we can't, use you. So the technology is a beautiful thing.
That's amazing that you guys have that platform. Talking real quick about the family dynamic too. I mean, when we talked last time, you talked about adult children crying on the phone out of sheer relief after hearing about your services. What's the emotional toll you see families carrying, and what are they most afraid of?
Yeah, that's huge. We work with probably almost 50% of the time an adult child will be involved in a move. Slimmer percentage of probably less than 10% the adult child's handling all of it without the parents' involvement. But it is the biggest thing that they're concerned about is that their parent will be ripped off. You know what I mean? Somebody will take advantage of them. That's why they want to be involved. And which I completely appreciate. We would be doing the same thing for my mom. You mentioned we're part of the Age Tech Collaborative. They recently had a founder summit, and I wasn't able to attend, but my co-founder, Lisa Burns, did. And she came back with this report that 2 of the venture capital groups put together about cyber fraud. And they were saying that 1 in 3 people have been victims of cyber fraud, believe it or not, cyber crime. And they said scams targeting individuals ages 60 and older result in more than $3.4 billion in losses, Jerry, just in 2023. That was just in 2023, wow. Those losses. And then do you want to know the average? The average loss was over $33,000. So it's a very real thing for these adult children to be concerned about their parents and being taken advantage of. I was talking to a woman the other day that is down in Florida, and her parents are in Florida as well, and she helps people find senior living communities. She's got a significant sized business. And she said, as happens with your parents, my parents went off to sell their home. They didn't lean into me for support. And she goes, they left $150,000 on the table. The realtor came along. And then of course they had a friend who had a buyer and the house is sold. And she goes, and it's very frustrating. So these adult children want to be involved to make sure that first and foremost, but secondly, just to try to take some of the stress off their parents. So when we talk to them and we let them know how we're going to help them, they're really relieved. I think the story I told you it was actually a couple that was in their 70s moving into a beautiful community in independent living, but he felt like he needed to help them. I don't know if he was their only child, but one of our relocation specialists called him and she explained all the ways we could help, he did break down crying. He goes, I had no idea how I was supposed to do this. I don't want to let my parents down, but I have a job. My wife has a job. My kids have a million activities. And he was so relieved. And so a lot of the testimonials we get from the adult children are, just being there for my endless questions or not having had to vet movers was a huge lift off of me. You were the calm in the storm, because it's hard when the adult child gets involved in managing it because, the biggest issue is the stuff, right? And then the parents always want to give the stuff to the kids because if they give it to the kids, they feel like they're not giving it away. And so the memories are sticking around, right? But what's the first thing the kids say? I don't want that. And then you're like, okay, we can't say that. One of the best pieces of advice I could ever give to an adult child is take whatever they want to give you, take it. Take it. It doesn't matter what you do with it later. If you take it, they can move forward because there's memories associated with whatever it is they want to give you. So they want those memories to carry on. So if your parents offer you something, just take it and don't say this is junk or it's not. Do you know what I mean? Because that stops a move in its tracks. That's one of the biggest problems when adult children get involved. And then the parents are like, "Oh, forget it. This is a bad idea. I don't want to move," or whatever it is, right? Or it just creates this tension between them. So, anytime you can kind of relieve them from having to go through the stuff with the parents, and let that outside professional, that senior move manager I mentioned to you, do that, it's a much better situation for everybody involved because they're not emotionally attached to it. And, if they say to that senior, "Hey, I know you love these yadros, but right now there's just no value in them, but we can repurpose them and bring them to this charitable organization that will," that sounds very different than their adult child saying, "Mom, those aren't worth anything." You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, we're a huge lift for the adult child because then we can also, a lot of times we're working in concert with them and they say, "Hey, I just called my mom today about that. Please follow up with her. She's ready to go through the comparative market analysis with you." You know what I mean? So sometimes it's teamwork too to get the ball moving forward.
All four of my grandparents ended up in some form of senior living community at some point. And so my parents have all of their stuff still in the basement for the last 20 years. They took everything from my one set of grandparents' house and then my other set of grandparents' house. And now the entire basement is just full of their stuff. So, and they also still have my stuff from when I was a kid. So I'm just thinking about when they decide to move out of that house, that's going to be such a daunting project now, so we're definitely going to need to call
Don't
you
worry,
guys
call
to
us.
help.
We'll get you some help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest emotions that people carry, especially the family members, is guilt when it comes to this whole experience. How do you help families let go of that guilt while still being able to show up for their loved one?
Well, at the end of the day, we called our company Live Now because we really believed that someone that was considering a move to a community was going to live a better life in that community. And it's definitely in the independent living. Like when I do presentations now, I'll say, how many people are tired of cooking? Usually the women, but sometimes the men raise their hands. How many people want to make new friends? How many people would like more activities in their life? How many people are tired of keeping up the house? Literally their hands go up for all these things, Jerry. And so if that's the case, they're going to live a better life in the community when they're going to make new friends. They're going to have more activities. They're going to have good meals cooked for them, right? They're not going to have to worry about the house falling downstairs, anything like that. So they're going to live, in our opinion, a better life in that community, right? And so I think that the adult children also recognize that they're going to live a better life if they can get them to that community. And that even applies to memory care, because as we were thinking about the name for the company, I'm like, let's really think this through. What if they have to move into memory care? Well, you know what? At that time, I was watching my brother-in-law's mom deteriorate in her condo where she was living by herself. And her ex-husband would come over every day and take care of her for the most part, but she was still by herself there and feeding the cat too much and not, you know what I mean? And I'm like, she would have a much better life in that community. And sure enough, as soon as they did get her into a memory care, she started to come to life again. Do you know what I mean? And she was being better taken care of. And that's always a good thing. When we talk to the adult children, those are some of the things that we talk about is the quality of life for your loved one will be much better there. We really support that. Every time we do a presentation, we tell the people in the audience that, the prospects, like, you will live a better life in this community. It's been proven. And we always love to say this. This one gentleman said this to me about a year ago when I was out in Seattle. He goes, it's like this. Better 5 years too early than 5 minutes too late. And I'm like, I like that. I said, can I use that? That's a really good one. And that's the truth of it, And that's what we say to them when we talk to prospects. We're like, go out and like move to that community now. What are you waiting for? It's like a country club lifestyle. Why wouldn't you want to take advantage of that? If you're planning to move, why wait? Go and take advantage of that amazing lifestyle now. Make new friends, get involved in activities. They will live a longer, healthier, happier life there. And so that's why we call the company Live Now. Our goal is to help them live their best lives now by helping them make that move to the community and not let that be what's stopping them from living their best lives.
Yeah. Yeah, and the longer you wait, your options continue to shrink to the point where it's no longer safe for you to be at home, and that's the last thing you want. Most people just don't have the conversation early enough. They can't wrap their head around it. They have parents in their late 70s, early 80s who are still living at home, who they haven't even had the conversation yet. What happens if, and that's such an important conversation to have.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely
Yeah.
right. But it's hard to broach that subject sometimes for some of them.
Yeah. I also think too, talking about the whole guilt piece, there's a portion of guilt that's actually grief. It's you grieving the relationship you had with your parent, whether it's just them no longer being in the house you grew up in anymore,
Yeah.
or maybe they're in a state of cognitive decline and you're grieving the relationship because the mom or dad you knew is no longer the same as they were. So that's a big piece of it too. And while you recognize that moving to a community is going to be the best fit for them, it's also this whole disruption in what you know as their life, as it's been for the last decade or 2 decades. So it's got to be hard.
It's very hard. I think it's extremely hard on
Yeah.
the adult children. I have a friend who had to move her parents into a community. Her dad was in good shape, but her mom wasn't, and needed to be where she could then get some memory care support. And so she found a community for them. And but what broke my heart was, this is before we started our company, she spent all her weeks going from Chicago, an hour and a half away, to what was she doing? Cleaning out the house, calling movers. She goes, I called 5 movers, not one returned my phone call. Instead of spending that time just like directing someone that could do that work for them and being in the community to make sure her dad got settled in nicely, because he was the one that didn't want to go, and then finally he threw up his arms. Well, then he went into a depression. But if she had been able to use that time being at the community every day and just spending time there and helping them acclimate, that would have looked very different for them. Right. And I know too many stories like that too, where instead the adult children are dealing with the manual labor that could have been outsourced if they knew that there were people available to do that for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Family members take on those dual roles too often as caretakers and as adult children. And it's really difficult. Looking forward, I want to talk about the next decade. We all know what's coming. And one of the data points that you shared last time was that 13 to 14 million boomers will exit the real estate market. What does that mean for families, communities, and providers?
Well, it's great news for communities, because once they exit the real estate market, they're going to go into rentals, senior living communities, or some will pass away at home, right, over the next 10 years. But that is a staggering amount of people leaving the market. Nobody's talking about it, ironically. It's strange to me, but that came from the Fannie Mae and U.S. Census Bureau, that information. So it's very real. And it makes sense. It's great for senior living. My understanding is I was just at a conference, the Interface Active Adult Conference, which was excellent. And they said in senior living, there are 2 million units. Only 116,000 are active adult. But there's 2 million units. They need to build 1 million more units to keep up with the boomer population that's going to be needing to move in. And I always love to add this stat, because people aren't talking about this either, but the amount of people aging solo, no kids or spouse, will quadruple in less than 10 years to over 8 million. So those people, more than anyone, in my opinion, will need to move to a senior living community to get the kind of care they deserve, right? And have the people around them, friends and things like this, rather than being isolated in their home. And then who's going to help them? So there's this tsunami coming, and everyone keeps talking about the silver tsunami. And then I just heard somebody say, we were talking to some venture capital today, and they said, nobody's really feeling that. And I'm like, oh, you're going to feel it. It's just starting, right? It's really over the next 10 years, where are these people going to go? But I think that single population too is really an interesting situation. And then you have to think about it too. What happens when these people didn't move into a community and they pass away? Who's going to handle disposing of all their belongings and selling their real estate? And that's something else that we do, because somebody is going to have to help. If they left it to a nephew in Michigan and they live in Chicago, how's that nephew in Michigan? It's going to be tens of hours of time just closing out their accounts and things like this. Now imagine also having to go through all the belongings and sell the home. So we've started our estate settlement business as well to manage that aspect of it for families, to make it a lot easier on them. And again, going in with the same philosophy. We'll get you 2 bids to clean out the estate. We'll have 2 different realtors go out and give you a comparative market analysis on the home. We'll review those comparative market analysis with you. We'll answer all your questions. You pick which realtor, you pick which price you want to list it at. We're just here to guide you and make sure you have the good information to make the best decisions. So we do all the heavy lifting and put them in a position just to make good decisions. But that 13 to 14 million people leaving the real estate market is great for our supply and demand right now because supply is very low. But it's going to hit like a ton of bricks, I think.
Oh, I totally agree. When people hear these numbers about how the population is shifting, I think they're thinking about it in terms of like when we talk about climate change, right? And they're like, oh, in the next 50 years, the temperature on the planet is going to rise by 1 degree. And everybody's like, 1 degree in 50 years, is that really going to make that big of a difference? And it's like, well, yes, it's going to, but it's gradual, right? And it's going to happen faster than they're estimating, but it's still a slow buildup. Whereas with this, we're less than 2 years away from the biggest spike in older adults entering the senior living market than we've ever seen in history. So we're less than 2 years away from seeing a dramatic shift in what we're looking at right now. Given that, how do you think we need to rethink these support models in order to support that amount of growth?
Well, that's just it. So one thing I have noticed is our community's occupancy is better all across, it seems like. So we're already seeing a positive impact. And then we're seeing tons of expansions and new builds as needed. We need to have these. You really bring up a great point, because the other thing I'll add to that is there's a silent generation too. And they're the ones that are right now, living in these communities for the most part. And, if you look at it, like in the next 20 years, they say $84 trillion in assets is going to be transferred over the next 20 years between the baby boomers and the silent generation. About 16 million from the silent generation, 53 trillion from the baby boomers, right? That's a lot of assets being transferred. And I think that I'm not sure what senior living can do other than build. And then, of course, it's the conundrum. Everybody stopped building because of COVID. And then the interest rates and this, you know what I mean? And so all of a sudden building came to a halt and people were worried about doing that. And now we're going to be behind. So I think we're going to have to get super creative about housing this population as they do get to that point. And I think you're going to see people get really creative. I think you'll see more multi-generational homes, people moving in with other family members, or them building. I just saw something recently that was super cool, like a little unit that you can buy that you can put in your backyard if you have enough space for in-law unit. And I'm like,
yeah.
Right? Brilliant. I think we're just going to have to get really creative, because there's no way that the senior living market can keep up with the amount of units that need to be built, in my opinion, to get where we need to go. But then also it begs the question, Jerry, okay, so after the boom, what do you do with all those senior living units? So you have to be really careful.
Yeah, I agree. I'm of the same mindset when it comes to that, because at some point the population is going to level out and then decline. So if we have this gigantic increase in the number of communities, I mean, we're already seeing it with corporate real estate now, with so many companies working from home and having remote employees. They don't need the big office buildings anymore. What I envision, and I hope this is what happens, is we start repurposing more of what's existing in terms of infrastructure. And then if what you're saying is true, the 13, 14 million boomers are going to be exiting the real estate market. That's a lot of properties that could be repurposed into smaller senior living communities, boutique senior living. I think that's the future of senior living, because there's so many units, so many homes that are going to be available. And not everybody wants to live in a giant building with 100, 200, 300 other people.
Or can afford to.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, they do that now for some of our population that needs help, right? So think Down syndrome, or maybe people with severe autism, they live in these group homes, right? And so I know that that is becoming something a little bit more popular on the senior side. People are exploring that. That's the beautiful thing about being part of that AARPH Tech Collaborative group, because we get to see these up and coming companies, right? It's always the latest and greatest coming out to the market that go through that organization. And I think that is going to be a big part of it. I think we have no choice. We have to repurpose some of those homes to create group homes, if you will, right? There's one person there that cares for the 3 to 5 or whatever that live in that home. Yeah, absolutely. Now my sisters and I talk about a compound where we all have we're a little.
Yeah.
I, no, I don't see that happening.
No, we're the same way. We're like, let's build our own. Let's build
Yeah.
our own community where, I mean, we're musicians and artists and we love to cook. I'm like, what if we had a group of people who all shared the same values and interests as we did and we created our own little small community out of it? So
Yes, and you
I
had
do
one.
think we'll see more of that.
I agree with you. And then you have one person that's the care person, caretaker that helps with, yes, I agree 1,000%. I think that we have no choice but to move to a model like that. This is what I love about senior living. It's really this exploding, changing. It's a young business, right? And so there's just so much change. And I love that. I think that that's super exciting. I can't be in a stagnant environment. It's just too boring for me.
I agree. There's never a dull moment.
Mhm.
Talking about Live Now too, one of the really cool things is that you've made it financially accessible through smart partnerships and a model that it doesn't charge the family, which is awesome. How do you sustain that while staying mission driven?
Yeah, great question. First and foremost, when we pick our partners, we pick them because they're great. But we have found that most of the partners are very agreeable to paying us that small referral fee because we just save them the cost of a sale. Right? The cost of acquisition, nobody knows better than senior living what that is. And so if we can be there and driving business to these providers, and then they don't have to go out and call on all these different senior living communities, which is really expensive, a lot more expensive than partnering with us. It's just a smart business decision. And also we found that the providers oftentimes will say to us, oh my gosh, why didn't somebody think to do that before? That makes perfect sense. Or, oh, that's wonderful because you know what? I always get all these other questions and, that's not my area of expertise. I don't know how to handle it. It would be great. I don't have to, I can stay focused on what I do best, or, great to know that there's someone that we can lean into if Mrs. Smith isn't returning my phone calls, and I need an answer from her and that sort of thing. So we have found that it's worked very well so far. Now, I will tell you, it was something new that came to senior living. And so those providers weren't accustomed to that. They were accustomed to just going straight to the senior living community, calling on it and getting that business. And so, in the beginning, they were kind of scratching their heads. But then I think they recognized the value to the community, which is at the end of the day, and the value to the senior. That's all that matters. Is there value to the senior by using this model? 1,000%. Is there value to the community too? 1,000%. Because you know what? Now the senior living community sales team isn't talking to movers and senior move managers and realtors and trying to coordinate all this. It's completely outsourced to us. And all they have to do is stay focused on sales. And like LiveNow's got that for us. A supplier knocks on their door and they say, oh, we'll give you information to LiveNow. And now they no longer have to spend their time being a junior relocation person, which wasn't their area of expertise. They didn't know how to vet movers. They didn't know how to vet a realtor. And so they were uncomfortable half the time in those situations. They feel bad telling them no, but on the other hand, they're like, what do I know about relocation? One of our first clients summed it up best. She's like, that's not my area of expertise, and to outsource that just makes perfect sense. And it's in the best interest of the community. They signed strategic partner agreements with us, which confirm that they're licensed and they're insured and confirms that, they're going to do things like return phone calls and stuff like this. But it also indemnifies the communities. So if a truck blows up on the way to the community, which we've had a community where that happened, luckily it wasn't our move, but had it been our move, the community could have had a peace of mind knowing that that supplier was insured. And while it was awful that the truck blew up, at least their incoming residents' belongings were insured. If that was a mover that they had recommended and they didn't do that vetting, imagine, then they would be like, oh my gosh, are we going to get sued? Is that household goods company insured? Are they going to be able to cover that? You know what I mean? And that's the value that we bring then to the community, which is absolutely huge. So the suppliers, when they start to hear the value that we're bringing, they get on board pretty quick. So the beautiful thing is now everybody's pitching in to be able to provide this quality service to the residents, and the residents appreciate it because they don't have to pay for it. And better yet, they actually will get better deals going through us. So it's a win-win all around.
I can't tell you how many sales professionals or sales teams and even placement agents I've talked to who are like, I'll do whatever I have to do to help a resident move in. I'll move their stuff for them. I'll do this. I'll do that. And I'm just thinking like, why when you could just pick up the phone and call Live Now and have it taken care of for you?
Yeah.
That would give you peace of mind. It would give the resident peace of mind. streamline. I mean, like you said, it's a win-win.
Yeah, we also do internal moves for our communities because that's a big deal too. Like we were talking to an ED recently. She goes, my handyman or my maintenance guy is constantly doing, she goes, I want him to like enough. I don't need him doing these internal moves. That's not good for him, lifting heavy stuff and stuff like that. And there's plenty of other things for him to do. So we'll also coordinate those internal moves for them and move outs, which is a huge time saver
That's
for them
great.
as well.
And because you work with over 180 senior living communities, you've obviously seen partnerships that work, partnerships that don't work. I mean, what do you think communities could be doing better when it comes to supporting incoming residents?
I would say just committing to making sure that they do have the resources they do to make a smooth move. I think a lot of times the communities are like, oh no, their daughter's handling it, it's fine. And then when we talk to the daughter, they're pulling their hair out. I think that just recognizing that while the incoming resident might not say something to them about the move, I think a lot of times they interpret that as it's fine. They don't need anything. They didn't ask me for anything. That's very seldom the case. One thing I can assure you is, as we work with these communities, a lot of times the sales team forget then to make that introduction. And what happened is, Jerry, they started coming to us through our website and saying, I'm moving into this community. I know you work with them. Can you help me? So they weren't necessarily going back even to the community to say, I know that you work with this company. Can they help me? They were just going to us directly on our own.
Direct
and
to
I would
you.
say it's getting to the point. I just reviewed it this morning.
Yeah.
1/5 of the people that come to us come through our website because they know the community works with us and they're like, can you help me? Or the adult child, can you help? You know what I mean? And so I think that the communities, because people aren't complaining or asking all the time, or if they say, do you know the name of a mover? And they think they just need a mover and that's it. They don't realize they have 12 other questions. So I think that, and as like, who would expect them to have to think about this? Their thought process should be right on occupancy. That's their thought process is on occupancy. That's their job. That's their goal. So to ask them then to be worried about that part, is a lot to take on. So anyway, I think that they just a lot of times don't realize how much help they do need in the process. And I think, like I said, them coming to us as often as they do now through our website or calling us is proof that they do need and want help. So I think just putting a formal program in place, if it's not Live Now, put something else in place where that you just know. And I think it's super important. Give them choices. Don't just give them the name of one senior move manager. People need choices. A senior move manager coming in your home is really personal. It's someone going through your stuff, right? So that's super personal. So give them choices so that they can talk to a couple. Give them a couple of choices of movers. So, and especially a couple of choices from realtors. They should always talk to more than one realtor because that makes it competitive. Then the realtor is going to get real with them if they know they've got some competition. Right. So if they do put a program in place, it's just really important to make sure the providers are vetted and then that they have choices as they go along. And also because it's a liability to the community if they don't provide choices.
One of the terms, concepts, goals, I think, for everybody in the senior living industry is to provide dignity in aging. But everybody seems to have a different definition of what that means. How do you define that? And how does your team show up to preserve that with every one of your clients?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it starts with the people that we hire. Everybody that we've hired literally came to us because they wanted to work with this population. The one woman we just hired recently, she goes, it was so funny. I showed her a picture of me and somebody else. She goes, literally, that person that you were in that picture with, I sent that to my friend and said, these two women, these are the only two people I want to work for in senior living because she loved my company and this other company, what we were doing in this space, right? And we hire people that came out of corporate relocation, but people that came out of corporate relocation that want to take that knowledge and expertise and do something great with it. And so I don't know, the way that we preserve their dignity is by giving them the ability to make the best decisions for themselves by giving them all the information they need. They make all their own decisions. I think that's super important. We're not making decisions for them. We're not steering them in any direction. We don't care what providers they work with. We just want to make sure if they're working with a provider, they're a quality provider. And I think it's just in how you interact with them. And I think that everyone on our team, I can assure you, considers an absolute privilege to serve this population. And so that's what we look for when we hire people is just, is this something that is a passion for you? Do you consider it a privilege to take care of these people? And I think if we do that, it's been awesome. The one thing I marvel at is I can count on one hand the amount of service failures we've had in 3.5 years. and it's all been like trucks going across the country, you know, but we don't hear
Yeah.
complaints from the seniors themselves about our relocation specialists. That never happens. And it's been a couple of moves that got a little wonky going across the country. And I think I attribute that because somebody says, what surprised you? You know, what are the first couple of things that surprised you? That was a huge surprise to me because when I used to be in corporate relocation, especially when I worked for a van line on Fridays, I would brace myself, especially anytime after lunchtime. I'd be literally bracing myself for the, you know, that shipment didn't arrive, or, you know, there's damage, or, yeah. And we do
Yeah.
have it. And you know what I attribute that to? We work with a lot of very local providers, and they take great pride. They own their mover, they own their senior move manager business. They take great pride in their work. We do a really good job of vetting them. And then we work with people that take great pride in their work. And so we very seldom have issues, which is really such a great thing. And it does take a lot of stress off of us because if we do have an issue, that's what's stressful for our team because they don't want to stress out our client. They don't want to stress out the senior. They don't want to stress out the community. So it's like, we don't want service failures anywhere, anytime. So
You have so much intentionality in what you're doing, and the fact that your team is so aware of all of that to make that experience as great as they can for the resident or the family. I think that's what makes it so special. So I love that. You have such a extensive career in relocation management. What has building LiveNow taught you about aging, resilience, and what really matters in life?
you know what's really been the most striking thing to me is how attached they are to things. And it's not the thing they're attached to, it's the memory associated with the thing. And I really probably couldn't appreciate that until just this year. My last graduated and my first is getting married. And now all of a sudden my house that, you know, I would be like, oh my gosh, we need a different house. Ooh. And now I'm like, I'm finding myself really attached to my house because I raised my kids here. Now they're all leaving. Do you know what I mean? So I'm really
Yeah.
appreciating how hard it is for them to do that, to move at the age of 85 or 80 when they raise their family in that house. The grandkids have come there. They have to leave it and like, you know, that's hard. That's hard stuff. And I have a whole new appreciation for that. We actually have implemented some things to help them through that so that they can start to keep the memories and be able to let go of this stuff. A lot of our presentations are around that and they really appreciate it. Where we just, instead of telling them, now go through your spices and look at the, like, no, what we talk about when we do presentations is, you know what, let's just recognize what it is, and it's the memories associated with the stuff, you know, and that's really special and that's really important to you. So now let's talk about how we can capture those memories and allow you to let go of the stuff so you can move forward and live your best life. And our presentations really focus around that. You know, like one of the things we talk to them about is the pictures. I'm always like, how many people have bins of pictures or boxes? And they're all like raising their hands, right? And they're all laughing. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about what we're going to do with those pictures. And I tell them about how you can digitize them. I'm like, all right, and when we're finished digitizing them, we're going to put them in one of those picture frames. And you're going to put that picture frame wherever you sit the most. And now guess what? Those pictures that were sitting in those boxes that you never looked at, you can see them all the time. So we start giving them solutions like this, and they walk away like, okay, I can do this. I love that idea. You know what I mean? And so our focus is more about that sort of thing instead of here's where you can donate this, here's where you can donate that. It's like, and really at the end of the day, they can even let go of so many of those things if they can have their pictures in front of them all the time. Boy, I mean, honestly, if I had the wherewithal, I would give every one of them one of those picture frames that rotates the pictures. And I tell them, I said,
Yeah,
and when
yeah.
your grandkids are, you know, studying abroad in Madrid or whatever, they can even throw pictures, they can upload pictures in there for you and you can start to see, you know, like what a beautiful thing. So if I could, I would give every one of them one of those picture frames because I think it's really just acknowledging that that's hard. And I didn't appreciate how hard it was. And now I'm starting to really just by talking to them, but going through it myself.
Yeah, I mean, I think videos and photos are some of the hardest things to let go of if you ever had to let go of those things. Everything I have is in the cloud. I'm, of
Yeah.
course, a techie person, but knowing that I have those and I can always look back and they're in a place I can access them, it is reassuring. And then everything else is just kind of stuff at that point because but pictures and videos, that's all the experiences, all the memories, all the things you've gone through your entire life captured in a moment. So
Yeah.
to ask somebody to get rid of that or to do something with that, those are the memories that people want to hold on to the longest. So
So
that's
give them
great.
ideas.
I totally agree.
Yeah, sometimes like we'll tell them, like at the holidays, if you've got a bunch of china and stuff like that, and you're a baker, bake something, put it on it, and let them keep the plate. So we give them really creative ideas too for giving things away that mean something to them and they want to give it to somebody. So that's my favorite presentation. We do it at the holidays, how to downsize at the holidays, and it's just creative ways to be able to regift those things to a loved one that you want to give it to. And so I think they really appreciate that, because we're acknowledging it's important to them. If you've got a bunch of stuff you want to give away, and you really prefer that family member have it, but you don't want to push them, just lay it all out and then invite them all over and tell why that's special to you. And all of a sudden that candy dish that nobody wanted, when you explain that your great grandma gave it to you when you were engaged, they want it. Because there's but half the time they don't know the memories associated with it. They don't know the stories. And so to your point, tell the story. And then chances are they might change their mind about wanting it.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one last question for you. If you could whisper something to a family just beginning this journey, a moment of fear, grief, overwhelm, what would you say?
They will live a better life in that community. They'll be taken care of to the way you want them to be taken care of. Help them let go by taking the stuff. Help them because that's what's going to make it harder for them to let go. Help them let go by saying, I would love your china. Thank you. Whatever it is, because that truly does make it easier for them. And maybe if there's something super special like the china, then have mom over for dinner after they move into the community and put that china out or something. I would say that those are some of the sweetest things that you could do for them. They just want to know that these memories live on. They recognize that's the last move they'll make. Everybody knows it. We don't talk about it, right? We don't say that, but we all know that. And so I think just being sensitive to knowing that. I have a mom, she's 88 years old. She's sharper than me, sharper than any of my sisters. And so I understand how you can get frustrated, but I'd say during this transition, just try to be gentle with them, understand that this is a big move and help them by taking the stuff and respecting the stuff as they make that move forward and staying in touch with them after they get there too. Making sure they get settled in well, making sure that they did make some friends, just making sure that sort of stuff took place, I think is huge.
And I think that's the humanity piece of what kind of drives a lot of us in this industry. I mean, even me in marketing, our mission is to help communities connect with best fit residents. And we recognize how delicate that experience has to be for prospective residents, because while they may not realize it, we know that this potentially is their forever home. It's the last place they're going to move. And it's a monumental decision that they're making, whether they recognize that or not. And the same for you, in this experience with helping people make that final decision to downsize or to move into a community. So it's a heavy choice.
Yeah. It is. It absolutely is. I always say in a corporate relocation, they'll literally the movers will come and pack everything, including the garbage in the garbage can. They don't have to downsize, it's everything just picks up, gets moved to the next location, This is, completely different. So.
Yeah. Maureen, thank you so much for such a wonderful conversation. For those who want to work with LiveNow, refer families, or just follow your work, where should they go?
Just our website, LiveNow Relocation, LiVNOW, relocation.com, or they can follow us on LinkedIn. We post quite a bit on LinkedIn, some tips and whatnot. We have tons of articles on our website too. People can feel free to tap into those articles for prospects. If somebody's asking them about, how do I interview a real estate agent or how do I spot a rogue mover, tons of articles like that on our website and people can tap into it.
Okay, great. I will make sure we put all that into the show notes. So as we wrap up today's episode, I want to extend a huge thank you to you, Maureen Longoria, for joining us and sharing your insights on what it really means to support someone through a later in life move. Your heart, strategy, and innovation have created a model that's not just about logistics, it's about dignity, it's about protection, and it's about peace of mind. So if you want to learn more about LiveNow Relocation or connect with Maureen, all the links are in the show notes. And as always, we hope you found this episode insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. Stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to explore the evolving world of senior care, covering everything from innovative care models and leadership strategies to family support, technology, and the future of aging. And also remember that From Leads to Leases isn't just an audio experience, we're also a video podcast. So if you want to see the video versions of our episodes, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube or Spotify channels. I'm Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth. Thank you for joining us on From Leads to Leases, and please like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who might find it useful. I'm truly grateful for your time and attention, and until next time, lead with strategy and with heart. Chat with you again soon. Thanks, Maureen.
Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to From Leads to Leases. Are you ready to fill your rooms faster and increase occupancy? Visit ccrgrowth.com to learn about our Senior Growth Innovation Suite, a proven system to generate highly qualified, tour-ready leads, accelerate sales, and reduce acquisition costs. Let's connect and turn your challenges into opportunities. See you next time.